They say that when you die, your life flashes before your eyes, but that's a lie. When I died, I didn't see my life. I heard the sound of my family counting my money. The world was a cacophony of beeps and the frantic rhythm of compressed air being forced into my lungs. It was sterile, cold, and smelled of antiseptic and ozone. I was floating in a gray, featureless void, untethered from the pain that had ripped through my chest moments ago. Or was it hours ago? Time had no meaning here. I was Thomas Hale, 75 years old, retired Superior Court judge, and currently a corpse on a gurney in the ICU of St. Jude's Hospital. My heart had stopped. I knew it had. The crushing weight that had slammed into me during Sunday dinner right after the roast beef had been final. It was the gavel coming down on a life sentence. But the brain is a stubborn organ. It holds on. It listens even when the eyes are closed and the pulse is flat. The doctors were shouting orders, epinephrine, charge to 200. But their voices were distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears. There were other voices, though, closer, clearer. It was Evelyn, my daughter, the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I reviewed case files, braiding my hair and asking if I was going to put the bad guys in time out. Her voice wasn't trembling with grief. It wasn't choked with tears. It was sharp, pragmatic, and cold as the hospital floor. "Flatline," a man whispered back. Mark, her husband, the real estate developer who hadn't closed a deal in 3 years. "Look at the monitor," Evelyn asked, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Yes," Mark replied, "it's stamped." "Good," Evelyn said, "because if he wakes up, we're screwed." He was talking about auditing the trust fund next week. If he sees the withdrawals, just tell the doctor not to try too hard, Mark. Tell him Dad had a DNR. I lay there, trapped in the cooling meat of my own body, listening to my daughter negotiate my death like a contract dispute. The betrayal hit me harder than the heart attack. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a dull, suffocating realization that the love I thought I had cultivated was a weed. Then another voice, Julian, my son, the artist who needed time to find himself on my dime for the last 20 years. "Finally," Julian whispered to his sister. There was no sadness in his tone, only a profound, exhausting relief. "I can sell the lake house before the market dips in the fall. I already have a buyer lined up."
"Cash offer." "Shh," Evelyn snapped. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and roar at them, to banish them from my sight, to sentence them to the contempt they deserved. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was a ghost haunting my own deathbed. "Clear!" The jolt hit me like a lightning strike. My back arched off the table. Pain, white-hot and searing, flooded back into my chest. The gray void shattered. Color exploded behind my eyelids. The beeping changed. It went from a solid tone to a rhythm. "Beep, beep, beep." A doctor shouted, "He's back!" I gasped. Air rushed into my lungs, burning like fire. My eyes flew open. The room came into focus. Bright lights, faces hovering over me in blue masks. And beyond them, standing by the glass wall of the ICU bay, my family. The transformation was instantaneous. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Evelyn threw her hands over her mouth. A sob, loud and theatrical, ripped from her throat. She rushed to the bedside, pushing past a nurse. "Oh," she wailed, grabbing my hand. Her touch felt like ice. "Oh, thank God! We thought we lost you." Tears streamed down her face, but I looked into her eyes. They were dry. Behind the sheen of performance, I saw the flash of disappointment. I saw the panic. "He's back. We're screwed." Mark stood behind her, his face pale. He looked like a man who had just watched a winning lottery ticket blow away in the wind. Julian was staring at the monitor, as if willing the line to go flat again. He looked at me, then forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Dad," he choked out, "you're a fighter."
I looked at them. I looked at the children I had raised, the people I had supported, protected, and loved for decades. I saw them for what they were: vultures, parasites, waiting for the carcass to cool so they could pick the bones clean. I knew then that I had a choice. I could die. I could let the stress finish the job, let go of the tether, and fade back into the gray. It would be easier. Or I could live. And if I lived, I would have to do the hardest thing a father can do. I would have to judge my own children. I squeezed Evelyn's hand, not with affection, but with a weak, trembling grip that masked the iron resolving in my blood. I saw a light, I whispered, my voice a ragged croak. Evelyn leaned in, her eyes wide. What? It was beautiful, I lied. Peaceful. I'm so glad you're all here. The tension in the room broke. Shoulders sagged. They bought it. They thought I was the same doting, oblivious old man who wrote checks and looked the other way. They thought they had dodged the bullet. They were wrong. The bullet was just being loaded into the chamber. If you've ever looked into the eyes of the people you love and realized they love your money more than your life, listen to me. Don't close your eyes. Don't give up. Hit subscribe because you need to see exactly how I planned the verdict that would strip them bare. I died for 3 minutes, but I came back with a clarity that only the grave can provide. The next week was a blur of recovery and deception. I was moved to a private room. I played the model patient. I ate the tasteless hospital jelly. I let Evelyn fluff my pillows and coo over me. I let Julian bring me magazines I didn't want to read. You just rest, Dad, Evelyn said every day. Don't worry about the bills. Mark and I are handling everything. Thank you, sweetheart, I would say, closing my eyes. But the moment they left the room, the moment the heavy door clicked shut, the old judge woke up. I reached for the burner phone I had asked my old bailiff to sneak in for me. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Sarah, I said when she answered. Sarah was my former clerk. She was brilliant, ruthless, and loyal to a fault. She was now one of the top estate attorneys in the state. She asked, surprise coloring her tone. I heard you were. It was, I said, but I'm back. My own, I said. I need you to come to the hospital tonight after visiting hours. Use the staff entrance. Bring the red binder, the one with the irrevocable trust drafts, and bring a tape recorder. Sarah arrived at midnight. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. She sat by my bed opening her laptop. I pulled the filings like you asked, she said, her voice low. You were right. An amendment to your power of attorney was filed yesterday morning. I looked at the ceiling tiles. 9 a.m., Sunday morning, hours before the dinner, hours before the heart attack. It gives Evelyn full control over your liquid assets and real estate portfolio, Sarah continued. It waives the requirement for medical incapacitation. I asked. Sarah hesitated. She turned the laptop screen toward me. It looks like your signature, Judge, but the pen pressure is wrong, and the date. You were at church at 9 a.m. on Sunday. It's a forgery, I said calmly. This is fraud, Thomas. This is a felony. No, I said, not yet. Fraud is just money. I need to know why I had a heart attack, I said. I'm 75, Sarah, but my cardiologist gave me a clean bill of health 2 months ago. My arteries were clear. My cholesterol was low. Sunday dinner was roast beef, potatoes, and glazed carrots. Sarah looked at me, a dawning horror on her face. I'm saying that my daughter was asking if I was dead before the paramedics even arrived, I said. I'm saying that my son was selling my house while my body was still warm. The house, Evelyn and Mark are staying there. I know, I said. That's why you need to go when they're out. Use the spare key in the garden gnome. Go to my study. Behind the portrait of Justice on the east wall, there's a safe.
Sarah's eyes widened. I installed it 5 years ago when the cleaning lady was stealing silver, I said. I never took it down. It records to a hard drive in the safe. It has a wide-angle lens. Evelyn made me a drink before dinner, I said. A scotch and soda. She brought it to me in the study. She said I looked tired. Sarah stood up. She looked like a soldier receiving orders. 2 days later, Sarah returned. Her face was pale. She didn't say a word. She just opened her laptop and placed it on the tray table in front of me. She pressed play. The video was high definition. The timestamp was Sunday, 4:15 p.m. I saw myself sitting at my desk, reading a book. I looked healthy. I looked content. Then the door opened. Evelyn walked in. She was holding 2 crystal tumblers. "Evelyn," she called out. On the screen, I smiled. I took the glass. I thanked her. She kissed my forehead. But then the video cut to an earlier timestamp, 3:55 p.m. The study was empty. Evelyn walked in alone. She went to the liquor cabinet. She poured the scotch. Then she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. I recognized the bottle. It was my digoxin, my heart medication for a mild arrhythmia. She opened the bottle. She dumped the pills onto the desk. Then she pulled another bottle from her other pocket. She began to swap them. She was replacing my heart medication. Sarah paused the video. She zoomed in. The pills she was putting into my bottle were white, round, indistinguishable from the digoxin at a glance. "I had the lab analyze the residue in the glass you drank from," Sarah said softly. "And we found the pill bottle in the trash in the guest bathroom." The white pills were sugar placebos, but the drink, she took a breath. "It was laced with a concentrated potassium solution," she said. "High levels of potassium stop the heart. It mimics a massive cardiac arrest." I stared at the screen. I stared at my daughter's hands, steady and precise, as she poured the poison into my glass. They didn't just wait for me to die. They helped it happen. They accelerated the timeline because they knew I was about to audit the accounts. They tried to murder me to cover up their theft. The grief I had felt in the ICU, the sadness of a father realizing his children were flawed, evaporated. It was replaced by something else, something cold, something hard, something judicial. I was no longer a father. I was a judge, and the defendants were guilty. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady for the first time in a week, "I want to do more than that," I said. "I want to host a dinner. 2 weeks from now. Tell them I'm coming home." "They'll think you're handing over the keys," Sarah said. "Exactly," I replied. "Let them think they've won. Let them think the forgery worked." I looked at the frozen image of Evelyn on the screen. "Court is in session," I whispered. "Justice is not a swift sword. It is a slow, grinding millstone. It takes time to crush the grain, to separate the husk from the flour, and to ensure that what remains is the absolute, unvarnished truth." 2 weeks had passed since I died. 2 weeks of playing the part of the frail, recovering invalid. 2 weeks of letting Evelyn fluff my pillows while she mentally measured the room for new curtains. 2 weeks of listening to Julian talk about investment opportunities while he secretly browsed luxury car listings on his phone during my physical therapy sessions. I sat at the head of the long oak table in my library, the room where I had written my most famous dissenting opinions, the room where I had taught my children to read. The walls were lined with leather-bound books, the smell of old paper and lemon polish filling the air. It was a sanctuary of law and order. Tonight, it would be a courtroom. Evelyn asked, breezing into the room with a bottle of expensive red wine under her arm. "You still look a little pale. Maybe we should have done this in the dining room. The library is so—" "I'm fine, Evelyn," I said, my voice raspy but steady. "I wanted to be surrounded by my books."
Of course, she cooed, pouring a glass for herself and one for Mark.
Whatever makes you comfortable. She said the words with a smile, but her eyes were scanning the table. She saw the thick stack of documents sitting in front of Sarah. She saw the velvet pouch resting near my right hand. She saw the laptop connected to the large monitor we used for video conferencing. She didn't see a celebration. She saw a closing. She saw a payday. Julian walked in a moment later, looking disheveled in a way that was meant to appear artistic but just looked lazy. He smelled of marijuana and expensive cologne. "Hey, Dad," he said, dropping into a chair and propping his feet up on the rung of the table. "Glad you're still kicking." "Serious?" "Closer than you know, Julian," I said softly. Sarah sat to my right. She was the bailiff, the clerk, and the executioner, all rolled into one. She wore a dark suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She didn't smile at them. She didn't offer pleasantries. She sat with her hands folded over the red binder, a silent sentinel of the law. "Let's eat," I said. The meal was served by a catering staff I had hired specifically for tonight. Strangers who didn't know the family, strangers who wouldn't gossip until the police arrived. She was laying the groundwork. She was preparing me for the sale she thought was inevitable. When the plates were cleared, I cleared my throat. "I asked you all here tonight because my experience in the hospital changed me," I began. I rested my hands on the table. They were steady. "I died, children. For 3 minutes and 14 seconds, I was gone. And when you cross that threshold, you see things." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Mark, a flicker of unease. "I saw the truth," I continued, letting my gaze drift from face to face. "And it changed my perspective on inheritance, on legacy." Julian sat up straighter. The boredom vanished from his face, replaced by a hungry alertness. "That's heavy, Dad, but you know, we just want you to be happy." "I know," I said. "That's why I've made some changes." Sarah opened the red binder. The sound of the 3 metal rings snapping open echoed in the quiet room like a pistol shot. She pulled out 3 thick documents, bound in blue legal covers. She slid one toward Evelyn, one toward Julian, one toward Mark. "These are copies of the last will and testament of Thomas Hale, updated as of this morning," Sarah announced, her voice devoid of emotion. Evelyn reached for hers with a hand that trembled slightly. "Oh, Dad, you didn't have to do this now." "Read it," I commanded. The gravel in my voice was gone. This was the judge speaking. Evelyn opened the cover. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, skipping the preambles, looking for the numbers. I watched her face. I watched the greedy anticipation curdle into confusion and then into shock. "Section 4, I said. She swallowed hard. Her face had gone pale. "To my daughter, Evelyn," she read, her voice shaking. "I leave the sum of 30 pieces of silver." She looked up at me, her mouth hanging open. "What? Is this a joke?" "It's a biblical reference, Evelyn," I said. "I thought you went to Sunday school." I reached for the velvet pouch next to my hand. I upended it onto the table. 30 antique silver dollars clattered onto the wood, spinning and settling in a heap of tarnished metal. "It comes to about $600, I said. Evelyn shrieked, standing up. "I took care of you. I sat by your bed. I made sure you had the best doctors?" I asked. I nodded to Sarah. She pressed a key on the laptop. The room filled with the sound of static, and then a voice. It was unmistakable. It was Evelyn's voice, recorded in the sterile silence of the ICU. "Is he gone? Did the lawyer file the amendment yesterday? Good. If he wakes up, we're screwed. Just tell the doctor not to try too hard." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Evelyn stood frozen, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Mark looked like he wanted to vomit. "I heard you." "That's—" Mark stammered, standing up to defend his wife, though he looked more like he was looking for an exit. She was stressed. "Sit down." I commanded. My voice boomed, rattling the crystal glasses on the sideboard. Mark sat. He collapsed into his chair as if his strings had been cut. I turned to Julian. He was staring at the silver coins, his face a mask of confusion. He hadn't processed it yet. He still thought he was safe. He thought he was the favorite. "To my son, Julian," I said, reciting the words from memory. Julian's eyes lit up. He let out a breath he had been holding. "Dad, wow, thank you. I know how much that place means to you." "You didn't let me finish," I said. I picked up a document from my own stack. It was a deed transfer, stamped with the official seal of the State Department of Natural Resources.
"I leave you the memory of the lake house," I corrected. Julian's jaw dropped. "I donated it," I said. "It will be a sanctuary for wildlife. It will be a place for families to hike and fish." Julian shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "That's my inheritance! I have debts, Dad!" "I know," I said. "I heard you in the ICU, too. Finally! That's what you said over my body, Julian. You weren't mourning me." Julian slumped back in his chair, defeated. "You're crazy." "I am a judge," I said. Evelyn was crying now. Not the fake tears of the hospital room, but real, ugly tears of ruin. "Daddy, please. It was a mistake. We love you. We were scared about the money." "You have nothing because you built nothing," I said. "This is cruel," Evelyn sobbed. "Oh, I'm not leaving you with nothing," I said. I looked at Sarah. She nodded. She turned the laptop screen toward them. "We have one more exhibit," Sarah said. The video player opened. It was grainy, black and white footage. It showed my study. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago, Sunday, 3:55 p.m. On the screen, Evelyn walked into the frame. She looked over her shoulder. She went to the desk. She pulled out my heart medication. She pulled out a second bottle from her pocket. Evelyn stopped crying. She stared at the screen, her face draining of all color until she looked like a wax figure. On the video, she swapped the pills. She poured the real medication into her pocket and filled my bottle with the sugar pills. She shook it. She put it back. Then she went to the liquor cabinet. She poured the scotch. She added the drops. I paused the video on the frame where she was holding the dropper over my glass. "This is not a dispute over a will," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "This is evidence of a felony. We had the dregs of the scotch analyzed. Potassium chloride, fatal in high doses. And we found the digoxin bottle in your purse, Evelyn." Evelyn looked at me. Her eyes were pleading, desperate, terrified. "Dad," she whispered. "I didn't." "You wanted me dead," I said. "You didn't just wait for nature to take its course. You gave it a push. You swapped my pills, you poisoned my drink." Kosi screamed, pointing at Mark. "He told me to! He said it was the only way to pay off the loans!" Mark jumped up, knocking his chair over. "You lying witch! It was your idea!" They turned on each other. The veneer of the happy couple dissolved in seconds, replaced by the vicious survival instinct of rats on a sinking ship. They screamed accusations, exposing deaths, affairs, and schemes I hadn't even known about. I sat there, watching them. I felt a profound sadness, a deep ache in the center of my chest where my heart had stopped 2 weeks ago. But beneath the sadness, there was peace. The truth was out. The infection was exposed. "Enough," I said. They didn't stop. They were too busy tearing each other apart. I roared, slamming my hand on the table. They froze. "The police are waiting in the foyer," I said quietly. The color left Mark's face. "Attempted murder is a crime, Mark," I said. "So is conspiracy." The library doors opened. The heavy oak panels swung inward. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, followed by a detective I had known for 20 years.
Evelyn Hale, Mark Davis, the detective said, stepping into the light. Evelyn started to scream. It was a high, thin sound that grated on the ears. She lunged toward me, reaching across the table, scattering the 30 silver dollars. "Daddy, stop them, please!" I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye as the officer grabbed her wrists and pulled her arms behind her back. "I don't have a daughter," I said. "I have a plaintiff." They dragged her out. She was kicking, screaming, begging. Mark went quietly, his head hung low, knowing he was beaten. Julian sat in his chair, staring at the floor, too terrified to move, knowing that while he might not be going to jail, his free ride was over forever. "You should go, Julian," I said to him. He looked up. "Go," I said, "before I decide to press charges for the theft of my silver last year." Julian scrambled up. He ran out of the room, dodging the police officers, fleeing into the night. The house fell silent. The shouting faded. The sirens wailed outside, then drifted away into the distance. I was alone. Sarah closed the red binder. She closed the laptop. She asked softly, "I'm tired, Sarah," I said. "I'll handle the police report," she said. She left the room, closing the library doors behind her. I sat in the silence of my books. The 30 silver coins lay scattered on the table, glinting in the lamplight. The symbol of betrayal. I reached for the bottle of wine. I poured myself a glass. My hand was steady. My heart was beating a strong, regular rhythm. I stood up and walked to the large mahogany desk in the corner. There was a framed photograph there. It was black and white, taken 40 years ago. It was Mary, my late wife, laughing on the beach, holding a baby Evelyn in her arms. I looked at her face. I looked at the joy in her eyes. I wondered if she would forgive me for what I had just done. I wondered if she would have had the strength to do it herself. I raised the glass to the photo. "I cleaned house, Mary," I whispered to the empty room. "I cut out the rot." I took a sip of the wine. It was bitter, dry, and complex. "Just like you always wanted," I said. I turned off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, save for the moonlight streaming through the high windows, illuminating the silver coins on the table like stars in a dead sky. I sat there in the dark, breathing in the silence, finally, truly alive.